You're listening to Motherhood in Between, the show for moms who want to rebuild their bodies, reclaim their energy, and keep pursuing the lives they're called to during the season between babies. I'm your host, Lauran Saunders, registered dietitian, mom of 2 and counting, and founder of Nourished Moms Collective. I help moms recover from their last pregnancy, prepare for their next one, and support their bodies and ambitions in the in-between season of motherhood. Because motherhood shouldn't mean depletion, and your dreams don't disappear when you become a mom. So whether you're rebuilding your health, rediscovering your identity, or growing something meaningful alongside your family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Can you get pregnant while breastfeeding? I really don't want to wean. This is a question that I actually get fairly often in my DMs. So upfront, yes, you absolutely can. However, it is a bit nuanced, and we are going to clear up some misinformation that you have maybe heard either on social media or on the internet. Now, this episode is directly piggybacking off of last week's episodes on menstrual cycle return postpartum. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go ahead and check it out. Many moms either assume that breastfeeding can be a natural birth control, or they assume that they need to have their period to conceive, and that both of which are very oversimplified. Now, do you need to have a period before you conceive? Technically, you ovulate before you bleed. Therefore, many women can get pregnant without ever bleeding or having an actual period. However, you still got pregnant on that first ovulation, which you would have bled had you not conceived on that. After you ovulate, there are only 2 options. You either are pregnant or you get a period and you bleed. You can almost think about your ovulation is when you purchase something, and the period is the receipt that comes after that. The receipt confirms what already happened, that you ovulated, which is where many women will say, well, I got pregnant, I never had a period. You technically would have had a period, you just got pregnant on that very first ovulation. Now, the other misconception was that breastfeeding can help as a natural birth control. That is not necessarily the case. For many women, yes, breastfeeding hormones, prolactin in particular, is going to suppress some of our reproductive hormones, especially progesterone. They tend to compete. However, it most definitely is not going to act as a good birth control because the return of a menstrual cycle varies on so many different things, and I did talk about a lot of that in the last episode. But breastfeeding itself is most definitely not a birth control option, and for many women, they actually tend to ovulate more than one egg while breastfeeding. So I know many women who got pregnant while breastfeeding, and not only pregnant, but pregnant with twins. So if you are using breastfeeding as a natural birth control method, I would be very cautious of that, especially because it can be hard to recognize that first ovulation if you are not avidly looking for those signs or testing your LH or ovulation strips. Now, I know many women who want to get pregnant again, they don't want to wean breastfeeding. And if you are in a place where your menstrual cycle hasn't returned or it's not regular, I highly recommend you go and listen to last week's episode. But if you are in a place where you do have a cycle back and you are still breastfeeding, that means your body likely does feel supported enough to support yourself, your breastfed baby, and now potentially a third because you do have that cycle back. Now, just a little bit of a recap from what I did mention last week. Breastfeeding can keep our prolactin elevated and our progesterone lower. That progesterone rise is really important in early pregnancy, with conception, with implantation. And this is not supposed to cause fear to anyone. It's more so just information to be aware of, where breastfeeding, yes, can continue to suppress some of that progesterone. And I do know some women in my personal life who had struggled with early miscarriages because their progesterone couldn't rise adequately while still breastfeeding. Now, that is absolutely not the case for everyone, especially if you know that you do have a more regular menstrual cycle and you are still breastfeeding and you want to get pregnant again. Or if you have done some hormone testing and you know where your hormone levels are at and that you do have adequate progesterone rise in your luteal phase. In fact, I've had multiple clients who have conceived while breastfeeding and have gone on to have totally healthy pregnancies. My client Catherine actually conceived on her first ovulation, so she hadn't even had a bleed. They knew they wanted kids close together, and we had spent 3 months really rebuilding her mineral foundation at that time to continue to support her lactation and her milk supply. And we were really aiming to help her have better energy, a more even mood, and supporting some gut symptoms that she had been dealing with. And that helped her body feel fully supported, that she could ovulate and go on and potentially have a menstrual cycle, but she did end up getting pregnant on that and went on to have a healthy pregnancy. And my other client was 18 months postpartum, breastfeeding a toddler, and still went on to conceive and have a healthy pregnancy from there. And I have another client at 11 months postpartum and still breastfeeding, who also went on to easily conceive. I myself actually got pregnant while still breastfeeding my first baby. Got pregnant with my second baby while still breastfeeding the first. With my second pregnancy, I found out when it was about a week before my daughter's first birthday, and I had no plans to wean her at all. I was just gonna see how long we could make it, truly. I knew I wanted at least a year, but I was gonna leave it up to her and see how long she wanted to breastfeed for. And I will be completely honest, breastfeeding in pregnancy was not my favorite thing. I felt really depleted. Breastfeeding itself already takes a lot on your body. Pregnancy itself takes a lot on your body, especially that first trimester. Doing both at once really can compound it. And I am not discouraging anyone from breastfeeding through pregnancy. If that is what you desire, what you want to do, I will be your biggest cheerleader, and I am all for it. And I will help you nourish your body so that you don't deal with the same symptoms that I did. Because you do need to be really intentional with your nourishment if you choose to breastfeed throughout a pregnancy. I personally fully believe that part of why my second pregnancy was a lot harder than my first is because I was still breastfeeding through that first trimester. I was more depleted going into that pregnancy because my body had been on demand, truly, since I had gotten pregnant with the first one. So it had been like almost 2 years at that point. And my body just didn't have a break. Again, I am not discouraging anyone. If you want to keep breastfeeding, I want you to keep doing it if that's what you want to do. And that's what I had wanted to do. I thought I had wanted to do it. I will say my daughter actually self-weaned right at the start of my second trimester. And I was very sad, but also very grateful that she did. Now, pregnancy is another point where many women will notice a drop in their milk supply. You can notice it in correlation with your menstrual cycle at that time of the month, and then pregnancy itself, just again because you have so many competing hormones. Your body is trying to juggle a lot at once. And many women, they don't tend to eat super great in that first trimester. Either you're feeling really sick and you're not keeping much down, or you just feel really blah, and your body is using up a lot of resources at that time. You might notice a decrease in your milk supply. For myself, I also had really more tender and less comfortable breasts during this time, and I could tell that my daughter wasn't loving the taste as much. That's another thing. The hormone changes can also change the flavor of your milk. This is totally common. It's explainable. It is not a sign that something is wrong in your body if you are experiencing these things. It is a common thing, and I think that is part of why my daughter ended up self-weaning as I started my second trimester, because of the change in the milk. And this is just something that I want you to be aware of as you go into another pregnancy if you want to breastfeed during that time. Now, because I had felt so depleted with my pregnancy for my second baby, I made the conscious choice to wean my son, that second baby, after his first birthday, because I wanted to give my body 3 to 6 months of really intentional replenishment before I got pregnant again with this third one. And I had decided that I didn't want to breastfeed through any more pregnancies in the future. Now, the only thing that would actually change my mind is if I got pregnant before my baby had turned 1. I would have at least continued until their first birthday. But I knew I wanted a little bit of a bigger age gap between baby number 2 and 3, so I knew I could give my body a little bit more time. Now, there is no universally right choice here, but I do think that you should be informed of what you're getting yourself into if you want to breastfeed during another pregnancy, and you should be able to recognize what your body is telling you and different signs and symptoms if your body does need more nourishment, so that breastfeeding and pregnancy journey can be a little bit smoother. So here are a few action steps for you if you are trying to conceive while breastfeeding. If you have a cycle that has not returned or it is not super regular, you really should be tracking ovulation signs, not just when you bleed and 14 days after. So are you noticing an increase in cervical mucus? An increase in your libido? We typically have better energy around ovulation too. Are you noticing any phases, especially if you don't have a cycle return yet? Keeping track of some of these signs can indicate when your body is ovulating before you bleed. And after ovulation, you really want to be sure that you are supporting your progesterone and your luteal phase intentionally. So this is not a time where you want to add a ton of extra stress on your body. Adequate nourishment, adequate minerals, mineral mocktails during this time are going to be really important. Making sure that you are eating enough protein and calories, especially during that luteal phase, is going to be really important. And if you can, prioritizing your sleep. And I know sleep quantity might not always be the best, especially if you are feeding through the night or you have a baby that tends to wake up. Supporting your sleep quality is also really important with our progesterone, and our circadian rhythm overall is really important for our progesterone and our sex hormone signaling. So being awake when the sun is up and being asleep when the sun is down is a great thing to try to match if you can. If you do get pregnant and you are breastfeeding, I do want you to expect that there will possibly be some supply dips, or your breasts may be more tender if you do get pregnant. That's not a red flag or that something is wrong. That can be a very normal, common reaction to the change in pregnancy hormones. And I think being aware of that can really help your experience going into that. And if you are going to continue breastfeeding through that pregnancy, you need to be so intentional with your nourishment so that you are truly nourishing three of you. Eating something every 3 hours, ideally a carb with some protein or fats. Getting at least 100 plus grams of protein per day. Hydrating with minerals. And really listening to your body's hunger cues so that you can be sure that you are nourishing your body enough to support all of you. And I just also want to say, when it comes to weaning, that timeline, go based on how you feel. It doesn't matter what other people are doing or what you feel like you should do. Truly go based on your preference, how you feel, possibly on how depleted you feel. But don't let the opinions of others impact this decision for you. If you are trying to navigate this transition, if you're wanting to get pregnant, you need menstrual cycle help, or you want to make sure that you can actually nourish yourself adequately in a breastfeeding pregnancy, you can check out our personalized plans and testing-based support rather than continuing to guess what your body needs at nourishedmomscollective.com. And next week, we are actually going to talk about pursuing your own ambitions outside of motherhood. It's a really exciting episode, so stay tuned.